In this video, we are going to get started with JavaScript programming. Up until now, our main focus has been designing static web pages with some elements such as form, table, and filters to let users communicate with website. We can call those type of applications static or semi-interactive. Now we are going to work with JavaScript, which is a powerful language for dynamic and interactive websites. In this video, we will be designing a countdown clock for a New Year event. We have to write JavaScript codes to display remaining day, hours, minutes, and seconds before the fireworks go off. Web-based programming comes in two types: server-side programming and client-side programming. In server-side programming, the program code is run from the server hosting the website. In some applications, users can interact with program requesting specific information from the server, but the interaction is done remotely from the user to the server. For example, when users need to fetch a piece of information from a database stored on a server, they have to use server-side scripting language. Or when users need to record customers' information, a server-side script must be run. The downside to this approach is that users need an internet access to be able to communicate with the server. Also, server-side codes use server resources, and if the server gets overloaded, the website, and in some occasions, the web server may crash. So, in this tutorial and video, we are going to design a countdown clock using JavaScript, and we are going to use client-side scripting for designing that countdown clock. So I'm going to go into the folder and open our web page. Here's the web page written in HTML language. Here we have the current time, current date and time in two separate lines, and we have placeholders for the number of days, hours, minutes, and seconds remain until the new year. So we are going to write a function in JavaScript for this countdown clock. So I'm going to use this script txt, open it Notepad++. If you would like to get these files, you can go to Cengage website and ask for this textbook, New Perspective on HTML5, CSS, and 7th edition. And it is the 9th tutorial of the textbook. So first, I'm going to go into the HTML file for this web page, and then link our JavaScript file to our HTML file. So I'm going to define script element because I'm going to use an external JavaScript file that is linked to our web page. There is another option to use JavaScript code as an embedded file in an HTML file, but it is not recommended. It's better to link an external JavaScript file to our HTML to be able to handle it in a better way. So I'm going to define open an end tag for a script element, and inside the script I'm going to set its source attribute. I have to define tni script txt.js as our source file, tny script underline txt.js, JavaScript, and I'm going to define it as differ. Differ means the web page or web browser differs loading the JavaScript file after the entire HTML file has been loaded. So we have set our script file and linked it to our HTML file. Now we can go into the JavaScript file and define our countdown clock. So for the first part, we have to display the current date and time on this part of the web page. So we need to define the current date in this element, date now. We have to define and update these contents using JavaScript file. So first I'm going to define a function in JavaScript file. I'm going to call it run clock. Open and close curly brackets. So we are going to store current date and time. Date and time in date now element, which is a div element. So I'm going to define a variable for current day equals a new object of type date, and then we need to fetch date and time portions from this object. So we need to define two variables, date_str equals current date, current day, and then we are going to use this function to local date string. This function will return the current date portion of this date object in the form of a string. We need another variable to store the time portion, time str, which is going to be again current day, and we can use to local this time string. So we have defined these two functions, and now we need to display the value of these two variables in that in date now element. So we need to display the current date and time. I'm going to save it. So we can reference the elements using getElementById. So I'm going to use document, which refers to the web document, and then we need to find date now element in that document, in the web document. We can use this function getElementById. Here we have this element, its ID is date now, and we are going to store our current date and time in this element. So this function getElementById will return that item. So I'm going to define its ID, and then we are going to define modify its inner HTML function, which equals to, now we want to add the date str in one line and then add a break line because we want to have date and time in two separate lines. Break line, and then add another, concat another string, which is our time str. Okay, save. Now we can go to the web page, see if that works. So we need to double check all these codes because JavaScript is a case sensitive language, so we have to be sure all of the variables are defined correctly. Current day, new type. Okay, so I have defined the function run clock, but I have not written a code to call that function. So we need to call this function so that it starts working. So it will return the current date and time in our HTML file. So now I'm going to go back. Now in these placeholders we need to calculate the remaining days, hours, minutes and seconds until the new year. So first we need to define calculate dates, the number of days until January 1st. January 1st. So we need to define a new variable called new year. It equals, with this function new, we define a new object of type date, and I'm going to set it as January 1st, 2023. Save, and then we need to calculate next year based on new year. Next year equals current day, and then get full year plus 1. So based on current day we can get the full year, and then plus 1 will return the next year. So we're going to set new year. It's set full year to the next year. So the new year is going to be the next year. And now we can calculate. Now we have our new year and next year defined. Now we can calculate the number of days until January 1st. We can define days left equals new year minus current day divided by 1000 milliseconds, 60 seconds in each minute, and then 60 minutes in each hour, and then times 24 hours per day. So this way we can calculate the number of days left until the new year. Based on this part, we can calculate the hours left in the current day. So I'm going to define var as hours left, which equals days left minus this function math.floor will return a number rounded down to the nearest integer. Math.floor days left times 24. The remainder of the days left, which is obtained using math.floor, or round down a number, times 24 hours, which is going to be the numbers hours left until new year. And then from hours left we can calculate the number of days, number of minutes left, the remainder of the time, calculate hours left I'm going to define hours left calculate minutes left minutes and seconds left var means left it equals hours left minus again this function math.floor of hours left times 60 minutes per hour. It will return the number of minutes left until New Year. And we will do the same for seconds left. I'm going to define a variable seconds left equals minutes left this time minus math.floor of minutes left again 60 seconds per minute. So now we have calculated the number of days, hours, minutes, and seconds left. The next thing that we need to do is to add these numbers to these days in the form of a countdown clock. So we need to add these numbers to these elements: days, hours, minutes, and seconds. So we are going to, for in this part of the code, we are going to display the time left until New Year. So we can reference those elements using document dot get element by ID again. The ID of these elements are days, hours, minutes, and seconds. And we are going to modify its text content. It equals math.floor of days left. And we are going to repeat this piece of code for other elements: days, hours. So this variable is going to be hours left. The third element is going to be mins left. Means, and second left will go into this element, into seconds. So save and then go to the web page. Okay, so it would return. So we need to run this clock, this countdown clock. After calling the run clock, we can call this function set interval to run this countdown clock. So we are going to set interval for run clock function, and its interval is going to be 1000 millisecond, or it must turn every second. Save and then go back to the web page and see if that works. Here we go. Here we have a countdown clock on this web page. So this is an example of a client-side JavaScripting. It can be used for this type of task like countdown clock or validating user input and etc. Whenever users need to access documents or information on a server like database, a form of server-side scripting must be used. So this function is working right.